Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back. This is a really amazing group of women and very inspiring to be here. And the only bad part about us is we have to follow all those other great speakers, so that's not really fair to us. I'm going to complain next time. But we do represent a different aspect of what women do in the world compared to everyone else that you've heard today. And what we'd like to do is I'd like to have each of these women introduce themselves and just tell you a little bit about what they do today and a little bit about how they got here, how they got to where they are. So I'm going to start with Dr. Kim Gregory.
Hi, I'm Kim Gregory, and I'm a full professor at UCLA, Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in UCLA, in the Department of OBGYN. I do high-risk pregnancies. I do a lot of the quality improvement and patient safety work for our department, which is a really important thing that's been going on in the world if you've been paying attention to what's happening in medicine. And how'd I get here? I started off at 5. I wanted to be a nurse, and my father said I was too bossy. I should be a doctor.
That's true.
And I did have the mother who said you could be anything you want to be. But I also had the mother who, she went to college when I was in high school, so she was the stay-at-home mom. And so she was the mother who told you that you could do everything, and I came up at the time when women were supposed to do everything. So I'm the doctor, the lawyer, the Indian chief, the mother, the tutor, you name it, I do it. And so, yeah. Your turn.
Well, first I just want to say thank you for the honor of being here. I think this is an extraordinary program. I'm humbled by all the women around me and all the stories that I've heard. And really, I can't think of anything more powerful or beautiful than women supporting women. So kudos to all the women out there. I wish I had an extraordinary story about my upbringing. I was born in the States to parents who, after a 28-day courtship, left Iran and moved way before the revolution. So I guess they were pioneers in what they did to move to the United States. They raised me with a very strong work ethic and kind of all the things that comes with that, perseverance and not giving up and all that stuff, as well as a very strong sense of family, respect for family, and obligation towards family. So fast forward, I went to, school in Los Angeles area. We moved to Dallas for a while. We experienced certain financial hardships, which probably just more than anything taught me perseverance. Went to medical school, got married to my high school sweetheart, went to residency, had my first child while I was a resident. And I want to share a story about that because I had always wanted to become a gastroenterologist, and that's why I went into internal medicine. So I applied for the position as an intern and only could apply to the Los Angeles area, even though that was unheard of. Most people applied broadly all across the United States. But I was already married, and I kind of had to stay put. So amazingly, I got accepted to USC. At the time, I was told there were 4,000 applicants, and they accepted 3 women. People. 3 candidates. And I got the position, and I was more than elated, and decided, well, the thing is not going to start for another year or so. This is a great time to have a kid. So I was a 3rd-year resident when I had my daughter, and of course, the second I conceived, that psychosis set in of how I'm going to balance this family and this job. So I set out to kind of do my research and ask a lot of women, and interestingly, despite there being many, many women physicians around me, nobody really heard me or gave me the kind of answer that I was yearning for, that I was looking for. And so I decided to page one of the current fellows in the USC program who happened to be a woman. I paged her. She finally responded at 11:30 at night, and I said, I just got into this program, I'm pregnant now, and I just really want to know how you juggle this whole work-life balance. And she said, it's 11:30, and I'm in the hospital. Click. So the next morning, I made an appointment with the chairman of the department. And I drove into his office, I drove to the university, went into his office, and I resigned from the position with much, much tears, to the point that I was mortified at how much I was crying in front of this man. And he was mortified at the fact that I wouldn't stop crying. And so I gave that position up. With much serendipity, my program director at Cedars gave me an extra year. I kind of thought I wanted to do something fringy of medicine, started learning about nutrition, obesity medicine, and the next year got a job at Cedars-Sinai to become the co-director of the weight loss center that I held that position for approximately 8 years. So I think, kind of in retrospect of what's happened over the last 8 to 12 years, the two take-home points would be, one, yes, perseverance. You know what you want, and I knew I couldn't quit. I had to go back to my job after I had my child because that position, the residency position, would not stay open for me. But also to be flexible and to recognize that our life paths change. And for me, to give up that GI position, which was extremely difficult, actually opened up a much bigger door of having this tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, that's great. Very nice. So I, like Kim, we're both high-risk OB doctors, so that's what we do on a daily basis, take care of women who are pregnant with high-risk problems. I'm also the chair of the OBGYN department at Cedars. This is the Cedars table right here, full disclosure. But I'm the only woman chair at Cedars, and Cedars is the largest hospital in California, so that sort of says something.
Only in First.
Only in First, yes. And before I came to Cedars, I was chair of another department at University of Illinois Chicago, and I was also the vice dean of the College of Medicine there, and I was also the only woman chair there. But to give a little of my background, I don't know why I wanted to be a doctor, and no one in my family was a doctor or in healthcare. So I don't know, but from the time I was small, I liked to fix things, and somehow that got translated into wanting to be a doctor. So in college, though, I started out pre-med, and I hated it. I hated the culture. And so I said, oh, I don't like these people, I don't want to do it. So I went and got a PhD instead. And then when I was applying to medical school, I essentially applied to a bunch of medical schools. I was almost done with my PhD, and the response I got was, well, obviously you're going to fail you're failing as a PhD student, so we couldn't possibly take you for MD. And I actually didn't get into any medical school, and I finally got on the waiting list of one school. And unbeknownst to me, the professor that I had as an undergraduate called the dean of the medical school because he knew I had applied and asked the dean if I got in, and the dean said, well, she's on the waiting list, and he said he apparently told this dean that they really should take me. So I got a call 10 days before medical school started. In August, I had already taken a job as a professor, assistant professor at Dartmouth, because I'd finished my PhD, and I got this call 10 days before, and the dean said, if you can fly down tomorrow and let me talk to you directly, we might be able to get you in. So I went down, of course, and he asked me, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm going to go into academic medicine and endocrinology, because I'd just been studying reproductive behavior and physiology. And he looked at me and he said, no, you're not. You're going to get married and have children and just be a regular old doctor, if we let you in. So I don't respond. Those kind of comments just get me completely focused on proving them wrong. And that now that I am successfully in academic medicine, unfortunately by the time I did, that guy died because I couldn't wait to call him up and say, guess what, buddy? But anyway, but I think the point there is it's really important to go after what you want. So I had made a plan B. I could have lived if I didn't get into medical school, but I knew I really wanted to do it, and you just keep going forward. And as Adrienne said too, things happen. You keep being positive and keep moving forward. So I did my residency in California. So I came from medical school in New Orleans to California for residency and fellowship, and stayed on faculty there, and then went to Illinois. And then came back to California, which has really been great to be back. So I think with that sort of segue, I want to ask these people a couple other things that really get at the issue of mentorship and potential barriers they face. So let's first start with Kim. And maybe just explain to us, give us an example of one barrier that you have faced and gotten around through or over in your path.
Well, to be in academic medicine and to be considered truly successful, you have to get funding. And so funding is like, it's like the gold prize. And it's really hard to do. And I was working with, I came out, and when you do academic medicine, you're supposed to be the world's expert at something. And so we always say you learn more and more about less and less. And when I finished my residency, my husband and I were a year out of sync, and I was afraid that if I went and made money, I wouldn't keep doing what I was supposed to do. So I went and got a master's in public health for that year that we were out of sync. And it actually was a really good time, because when you finish your residency, you're sort of angry and you just can't wait to go make money and take care of people. And when I got this public health degree, it reminded me of why I did go into medicine, and that, that there's this really big need, and it really refocused what was important to me, so that when I got to my fellowship and they wanted me to focus on this one little tiny aspect of OBGYN, I find that I couldn't do it. Coincidentally, that was at the time that HMOs started to become a big important part of medicine, and cost and value started to become really important buzzwords. And so I was able to take my interest in public health and tap it into medicine and talk about quality, and so my timing was right. And unfortunately, there was no one in OBGYN who was doing that. So I had to partner with someone at UCLA in internal medicine, because they were doing most of the work in cost and quality and HMO, and the technical term is health services research. So I partnered with this woman who, let's just say she wasn't a people person. And it was the first time in my life that I was interacting with someone who didn't think I was the best thing since sliced bread. And so everything I handed to her, she just ripped it apart and shredded it, and I would walk out of her office in tears. And yet, I was able to realize that she was really doing this to make me better. And plus the fact that I really wasn't in internal medicine, she was sort of squeezing me in, and that would be like at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we would have our conference calls where she would go over my papers at 2 in the morning. And it wasn't that she got up to do this. This was when she got through to the day where it was now my turn. And so I think that what the barrier for me was doing something at the forefront by myself, and believing in it enough to keep doing it, and then having to squeeze it in wherever I could, which just sort of, I think we were talking about these women on the brink. You're sort of always on the brink of something, and you just sort of have to keep believing that you can do it, and then finding the resources you need to get it done, and then being flexible enough to, get on that train and go to New York for that meeting every week. You have to do whatever it takes in order to get done what you need.
That's great. That's great. Adrian, a barrier that you faced and how you got around it.
I don't know that I have a barrier to share, but maybe a challenge. And the challenges of my adult life, I think, are very one note. They've always been about kind of balancing this work and family. That's been my enduring challenge. When I had my daughter and I was a resident, that was probably the most difficult decision I had to make to go back to work. It wasn't really a decision. I knew I was going to finish, and I had to finish. But I think the trauma and the difficulty that I endured during that time period was not comparable to other women that I knew, working moms. I had this kind of acute trauma that seemed above and beyond what it should be. And I think that part of that, when I look back on it, was the lack of enough people around me, mentorship perhaps, to really kind of say, hey, this experience is really universal. I'm kind of taken back as I listen to all the speakers, the different backgrounds, ethnicities, age groups, but we all share these common stories. And I think to me back then it would have meant so much if somebody had just said, you know what, we're all going through the same thing. And so I think whether that's considered a barrier or a challenge, it's probably not unique to me, but it's probably unique to most women, and it's something that's very fixable. We all share the same stories, and so we can overcome that barrier by kind of sharing the stories and commiserating or mentoring each other.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And again, brings us back to the theme of your meeting, which is the mentorship aspect and being, there are two sides to that relationship. There's the mentor side and then there's a mentee side. And I think some people don't realize that the mentee side is also an active side. You know, it's just not a matter of sitting there and letting people help you. It's really being involved. And so maybe I'll give a couple examples of mentor that I've had, and maybe then I'll have each of you talk about that. I think I've had many mentors over the years, some of which never knew they were a mentor. So I think that's the other thing that happens. You run across people and they become a mentor just because you observe them and what they're doing. And the first, I've already mentioned the first professor. I mean, I didn't even know what he did for me until after that whole story. But mentors can be very powerful in helping out and reaching out and helping someone that they recognize in that person, skill set, ability, etc., that they can then open doors for them. That's hugely successful. And I'd also say, quite honestly, I think all my mentors have been men. So I'm trying to come up with a woman mentor in my head, which there's nothing wrong with that, except it shouldn't be that way. There should be plenty of women in our paths that can act as mentors in similar ways that Adrienne suggested, but also in ways to even more directly help you with your career. I think the most important thing mentors have done for me is that recognize in me that I had the passion, the ability to do something more than maybe I thought at the time, and then helped motivate me by showing me that they recognized it. And so the little things that you can say to somebody can have an amazing impact. So Kim, what about you? Mentor you can think of, experience that stands out for you?
Well, I guess two. One is to follow up with that lady who used to work with me at 2 o'clock at night and really appreciating that it wasn't personal. And then I remember when I did finally get my first promotion and my first grant, I sent her some roses. And to this day, this woman tells people, do you know she sent me roses? And she called me up to say that it was the first time anyone had ever sent her roses. And so I thought, that sort of goes it goes both ways, that you have to really, and I tell that to my daughter because I have a daughter who's 16, and you know, whenever the teacher doesn't like her, I always think this is a good teacher. and that one of the lessons is that you really have to appreciate the value of people, and that it may not always be a very positive personal interaction. And then the second mentor is a gentleman who was the chairman of OBGYN at Martin Luther King Hospital. I went to UCLA, and I was doing my third-year rotation in OBGYN there, and my husband, he wasn't my husband, we had just met, and he was during his rotation there, but he came there because he wanted to be home for Christmas, and so he really wasn't interested in OBGYN. But we met during that rotation, and I ended up asking the chairman, just on a lark, to our wedding, because I thought this guy will never come. And he came. And because he came, we made a point of going around the table, and after that, every major society that is important in OBGYN, this gentleman was the one who made sure that I got invited, who put my name on the list, so that, and there's a lot of sort of town and gown organizations that I had never even heard of, but it was my association with him that got me into those organizations. So I think to Sarah's point, you really don't know who's going to help you or why they're going to help you, but it doesn't hurt to always extend yourself to the important people. Just just to say nice, not to get anything out of it or not to expect anything out of it, but you'd be surprised what you might get out of it.
Yeah, I think I can probably echo the same comments or feelings that mentorship comes in ways that you don't expect. And I don't know that I've ever been assigned an individual who's been assigned as my mentor, but certainly, through that fellowship and putting together this position at Cedars-Sinai, there were a lot of people who believed in me and validated me and maybe just kind of nudged me along, which was all that I needed at the time. I think a good mentor is also somebody who listens to what you have to say and hears what your wishes are, even if you can't articulate them properly, and maybe just plants that seed for you to do the right thing. And I'm looking at somebody in the room who did that for me.
So another slightly different spin here. I want to talk about what maybe are the most surprising thing you might have learned along your path. And I have two that I'll offer up. As you move, first of all, you never sort of know where your path is going to take you. I think that's one thing that's always surprising, and we've heard that echoed several times. But the two surprising things that really, one is, you're going to say, really? You think that's surprising? It's all about relationships. Everything about moving anywhere is about relationships, and it took me a long time as a young person to really recognize that every relationship you build, to make any kind of change in the world, any change at all, you have to have relationships with people. And that means your boss, it means your colleagues, it means everybody around you, and you just cannot underestimate that. So I think that's one thing that took me a while to figure out. And the other thing is, I grew up in a family where my father was a finance person. And the sense was finances are just too hard for women. They can't figure, it's just too complex. So they are simple. It's simple. It's addition and subtraction. It's cost and expense and revenue. That's it. That's it. And when I was about 40, I think I figured that out. But it's an interesting thing because all those jobs, those big level jobs, you just need to understand that. And that's part of the barrier to women. They think they can't do it. It is not hard. So that one, you should figure that out as soon as possible because it's not hard. Okay, Kim, surprising things.
I think the most surprising thing I appreciate is how humbled I am by God. And that there are days where you go to work and you think you've seen everything, and then it's something you haven't seen before. And how to interact with that family that you've never met before, and in like 3 seconds or less, figure out what their needs are and how to tell them that they're going to have a problem, and how to help them address whatever the resources that you need to harness. It just sort of amazes me that I've been given that opportunity and the gifts to make it happen.
Now I feel like a Debbie Downer about what I was about to say, because that was so beautiful. And I have to say, just can I piggyback onto your comment before I become a downer? Because really, what we do, I know that a lot of people look at physicians and it's like glamorous because what you see on TV, and it's like, wow, you're a physician. But really, I feel like we are in such a blessed position. We have so much, I have, and I know that my colleagues have so much gratitude for what we can do. And if I can just share a story, now that I've already gotten emotional, I may get emotional again. I recently experienced the passing of my grandfather. So we're a big family, lots of children and grandchildren, and everyone is there and they want to do something, they want to help, they want to participate. And because I happen to be a physician, everybody looks to me and allows me to do the things that nobody else can or is allowed to do. In this circumstance this past week, it was not about giving a little bit of morphine to somebody who was dying at home, but it was about being able to have that proximity and that closeness with that individual. And there is so much gratitude for me to be able to do that. So that relationship and that opportunity that we are given, I really think that we do take from a place of gratitude. Okay, now to being a buzzkill. You know, when I grew up in a household where I was the first child. My father was born or was raised kind of in a boarding school, and so it was very military style. And he didn't care that I wasn't a guy, and he kind of treated me like I was a guy. And I was raised very under strict rules and lots of discipline. And he had tremendous respect for women and kind of tremendous vision for me and what I could do. So I never thought that there was any kind of discrimination. You know, women were great. We could do anything we wanted, and I was going to do whatever I wanted, period. When I started working, I realized that discrimination is present. And it's not the way you think about it, because when you think about discrimination, you think Rosa Parks, you think Holocaust. This is kind of a much more subtle, kind of indolent discrimination. But it's there. And the point is not to be down about it, really, but the point is to recognize it. Because if we don't recognize it, or if we brush it under the rug, or if we just accept that we're lucky to have this job as if someone has given us charity, we're never going to change it. And so that was something that surprised me.
Yeah, and that's so true. I'm sure for all of us, we can come up. I'll give you a really simple example of that has happened to me recently, well, in the last couple of years. Most of my meetings, I'm the only woman. So at Cedars, at University of Illinois. So I've gotten pretty used to that, and you accept it. But I was at a meeting recently where my boss, who will remain nameless, the people at the Cedars table will know who I'm talking about, was introducing the people in the room. And it was a board of directors meeting, so a pretty high-level meeting. And he goes, oh, there's our Dr. So-and-so chair of surgery, male. There's our Dr. So-and-so chair of medicine, male. And there's Sarah. So that's a very subtle but real, and it's not that he didn't know my last name. He hired me, you know, so. But those are little things that you have to learn how to take in step, and you have to walk that line of making a joke. And I'm like, you talking to me? So you try to make a joke of it, so they kind of remember they misstep, but you can't be too dramatically against it, or you kind of lose your position to be listened to. So it's a walk that I do a lot. So given our last minutes, what I'd like to do is ask Adrienne because she takes, her specialty is really in many ways sort of preventative medicine and with respect to obesity and weight management, weight loss, and healthy, trying to help people be healthy. So I wanted to give her an opportunity to give a few healthy tips for women.
Okay. So I think I'm going to give you...
Unless you're pregnant, Kim and I have no idea what to do, so...
So I think I have 3 tips, and I don't want you guys to roll your eyes at me, because there's no novelty in what I'm going to tell you. But interestingly, there's an abundance of scientific information that substantiates these little things that we all know that our moms taught us. The first is physical activity, okay? So whether physical activity does not necessarily mean exercise, but it means some form of activity. And there have been a tremendous number of studies that have demonstrated that 30 minutes of activity a day is sufficient to reduce heart attack, stroke, heart disease, improve type 2 diabetes, reduce cognitive decline in aging people, prevent the onset of Alzheimer's, reduce the risk of breast cancer, ovarian cancer, possibly colon cancer, and the list goes on and on and on. You don't have to run a marathon, you don't have to get up and go to a gym, but 30 minutes a day of physical activity. Don't tell me you can't get that into your day, because 30 minutes is something that we can all wrap our brains around. What was my second tip? The second tip...
Are you pregnant?
The second tip is sleep, okay? So as busy women, we are all chronically sleep deprived. But actually in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a lot of information that's come out about the effects of sleep deprivation. which include excess weight, obesity, which include insulin resistance and the onset to type 2 diabetes. And it's interesting that that effect is so quick and so profound. So they've done studies where they've taken individuals who have usually 8 hours of sleep. They take a control group that continues to sleep 8 hours a night, and then they take another intervention group where they sleep deprive them to 4 hours of sleep at night. And then they do that for 2 nights, and on the third day measure their hormones. On the third day, their insulin levels skyrocket. They start to develop dyslipidemia, which is abnormalities in blood cholesterol. And all of their hunger hormones, those hormones that nag you in your brain and tell you you're hungry, skyrocket. That's with 2 nights of sleep deprivation. So yes, we got to get it all in, including the 30 minutes of activity, but I think it's important to respect our sleep. And then the last one is really weight management. So the average American gains 1 to 2 pounds per year. It's an insidious weight gain, but at the end of 10 years, we're up 15 pounds, we're up 20 pounds, maybe 10 pounds. Over the decades, that adds up to 30. The studies show that very modest reductions in weight, modest means 5 to 10%. So you weigh 200 pounds, 5 to 10% is 10 to 20 pounds. Not a tremendous amount. Is sufficient to improve all comorbidities that are associated with obesity. Diabetes, heart disease, cholesterol, blood pressure, sleep apnea. Again, there's an endless list. And of all these studies that I've read and that I've researched over time, the one that always sticks out and to me is the most remarkable and I think will resonate with a group of women is a study that they did on individuals who were survivors of breast cancer. And for these breast cancer patients who were estrogen positive, they got tamoxifen for 5 years, which is the standard of care. And then they took this group of women and they divided them to more tamoxifen or weight loss, 10% of weight loss. And they found that, in fact, the individuals who had the weight loss suffered recurrence of breast cancer at 1/3 of the rate than the tamoxifen category. That is super impressive. If I could create a pill that would reduce the cancer recurrence rate by 1/3, I wouldn't be sitting here right now. I'd be at the beach. So weight management would be my last tip.
Can I just say, though, that, and I appreciate that even though we take care of high-risk pregnant women, I do want to say, and I split the audience in half, that, for those of you who are not yet pregnant, think about it so that and for those of you who've already been pregnant, tell the good stories. That I think that people forget that pregnancy is a physiologic state. It's not a disease. And so, go forth and multiply.
So that we'll stop there, and we really and come see us if you're pregnant too. That's what she really means, right? But we really had a great time.